Please pause for a moment of silence, the intercom crackled. Every head in the classroom lifted. For Captain John Grayson, father of student Emily Grayson. Killed in action November 11th, Syria. The room went still. Even the kids who were mid-laugh stopped. No one moved. No one whispered. Just silence, thick, unexpected, and heavy. The kind of silence that wraps around your chest and doesn't let go. And there I was sitting in the very last row in my dad's faded dress blues jacket, name tag chipped at the corner hands, gripping the frayed sleeves. For the first time in a year, someone else said his name. That morning started like most others, except it wasn't. It was Veterans Day, a day I used to love. A day Dad used to wake us up early to hang the flag before school. A day that now hit like a ghost train. It had been 1 year since the explosion. 1 year since the men in uniform stood at our door. 1 year since taps echoed through Arlington and someone I didn't know handed me a folded flag. 1 year. And not a single person at school had said his name since. Not teachers, not students, not even during last year's Veterans Day announcement. I tried not to take it personally, but that morning I made a decision. I opened the cedar footlocker at the end of my bed, the one they sent home with his belongings. Inside, a photograph of me on his shoulders at age 5. A medal he never told me he'd earned. His jacket. Navy blue gold buttons sleeves that hung past my hands. And pinned to the inside pocket. A note folded into quarters. It read, "If the world forgets me, M. Just wear this, and I'll stand beside you." I put it on. I walked to school like a ghost in someone else's skin. The jacket didn't fit. But I didn't care. At first, no one noticed. Then came the stares. Then the whispers. At my locker, a boy smirked. "You going to a costume party?" Private. In homeroom, a girl giggled to her friend. Is she having a crisis or trying to be patriotic? Barbie. I didn't answer. I didn't even look up. I just sat there, jacket buttoned to the collar, hands folded on my desk like I'd learned at the funeral. I knew they wouldn't understand. And honestly, I didn't wear it for them. And then, the intercom buzzed. It was Principal Harris. He sounded different. Slower. Measured. He announced that today the school would honor a fallen soldier. That this moment of silence wasn't just tradition. It was personal. He said my father's name. Captain John Grayson. My spine straightened. My ears rang. I didn't know he was going to say it. The letter I wrote months ago, I never got a reply. I assumed they ignored it like every other email from just a student. But suddenly, there it was, his name echoing across the school's loudspeakers. Kids stopped tapping pencils. Teachers turned toward the speakers. And for 60 full seconds, time held its breath. When the silence ended, no one laughed. Not even the boy in front who always cracked jokes during announcements. I felt eyes on me, lots of them. But they weren't mocking now. They were curious, respectful, maybe even a little ashamed. One girl whispered I didn't know. Another nudged her friend and nodded toward me. And I just breathed. For the first time all day, I breathed without weight. Because I didn't need applause. I didn't need sympathy. I just needed someone else to remember. To say his name like it mattered. That was enough. You'd be surprised how heavy a jacket can feel. Not just physically, but emotionally. Like it carries the silence of every night you waited for a call that never came. Like it holds the weight of every "I'm proud of you" that never got said. That's what it felt like buttoning up my dad's service jacket that morning. It was too big in the shoulders. The sleeves nearly swallowed my hands. And the fabric had that faint scent of cedar and dust, like time had stopped the day he left. But I wore it anyway. Mom didn't say much when she saw me. She stood at the doorway of my room, arms crossed, her coffee cooling in her hand. I half expected her to tell me to take it off. Instead, she whispered, "He'd want you to." I nodded. I didn't want today to be like last year. She looked away. Yeah, last year hurt. Last year on this same day, I sat in that classroom hoping someone would mention him. Hoping a teacher would remember. hoping my classmates would connect the dots when they saw my last name on the plaque outside the auditorium. No one did. Veterans Day passed with a generic slideshow and a brief thanks to all who served. Not a word about him. I went home that afternoon and cried into my pillow until I fell asleep. Mom never asked why. I think she knew. This year had to be different. Wearing the jacket wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about making people uncomfortable. It was about making sure my dad wasn't invisible. You see, there's something cruel about the way people forget. They move on so quickly. The world spins. Schedules resume. And meanwhile, there you are, frozen in a moment that changed your whole life. The truth is, I didn't want pity. I didn't even want applause. I just wanted the world to stop for a second. To remember the man who gave everything. To say his name. Walking through the school doors, I felt like a relic from another era. The metal buttons caught the morning light. The insignia on the shoulder still gleamed even after all these years. But I kept my head high, not defiant, just grounded. At first, no one said a thing. Then the whispers started. She's seriously wearing that. Is that like her dad's or something? Maybe it's a drama club thing. I kept walking. I made it to my locker when the first comment landed. One of the basketball guys leaned against the wall, arms folded. So, you trying to be Captain America now? I didn't even blink. Just spun the dial on my locker. Click, click, click. He nudged his friend and chuckled. Some people will do anything for attention. I felt the heat rise behind my eyes, but I held it in. Dad always said courage isn't loud, Em. It's steady. I kept my hands in my pockets and let his jacket do the talking. In homeroom, I could feel the tension the moment I walked in. A few students stopped mid-conversation. One girl just whispered to her friend loud enough for half the room to hear. She's having an identity crisis, right? Like, is this a cry for help or something? They giggled. Not cruelly, but carelessly. The kind of laughter that doesn't know what it's mocking. I sat down in the back row. Our assigned seats never changed. Same chipped desk. Same view of the clock. Same place I sat last year when no one said a word. Only this time, my father's jacket touched the floor, and my shoulders didn't sink. I watched the clock. 8:12, 8:14, 8:17, and then buzz. The intercom clicked on. That's when everything changed. That's when the room froze. When the laughter stopped. When the school finally said his name. And I sat there surrounded by silence, wrapped in the same jacket they once folded over his casket. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just whispered in my mind. They remembered Dad. They finally remembered. It's funny what people forget and what they pretend to forget. There's a hallway near the library, narrow and dim. It holds a wall plaque titled Honored Alumni. It lists the names of former students who served. Dad's name is on that plaque. Bottom right corner. Third row down. Misspelled. Grayston instead of Grayson. I noticed it the first week back after his funeral. Told the office about it twice. Nothing changed. After a while, I stopped checking. It just became part of the building, something people passed on their way to somewhere else. But not for me. For me, that wall meant something. It was the only place in the school where his name, however flawed, still existed. So during lunch, I made my way there. Same as I had every Veterans Day. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. There were students walking past, laughing and tossing snacks. No one paused. No one looked at the wall. No one even glanced at me. Just a girl in a too-big jacket standing in front of a dusty list of names. My fingers brushed over the brass letters. The Y was crooked. The letters were fading. And suddenly I remembered his voice, one of the last voicemails I still had saved. Don't let them forget me, Em. Even if you're the only one who remembers, that's enough. The funeral had been military formal. Full honors. Taps. Flag folded with sharp creases and handed to my mom's trembling hands. But after the ceremony, silence. No phone calls from the school. No moment of silence. No one asked if I was okay. They all assumed I'd be fine. Kids bounce back right. What they don't see is how long grief lingers in the quiet corners of a lunchroom. How every father-daughter night hits like a gut punch. How silence becomes a second skin. I sat under that plaque back against the wall, legs pulled to my chest. Eating the sandwich Mom packed that morning, peanut butter just like Dad used to make. And I thought about the letter. The one I'd sent to the principal last April. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. Dear Principal Harris. I know most students probably don't know who Captain John Grayson was. He was my dad. He graduated here in '97. He died serving in Syria last year. This Veterans Day, I'm asking for just one thing. A moment. A single minute. To say his name. Not for me, but for him. Sincerely, Emily Grayson. I never got a response. I told myself they probably never read it. But this morning's announcement that meant somebody did. I glanced up as a shadow fell across the wall. It was Vice Principal Davis. He was older, a little stiff in the knees, always carried a clipboard. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there beside me reading the names. After a moment, he pointed to Dad's. I knew him, he said quietly. I looked up. You did? He nodded. 2 tours? Iraq. He was good. Real good. Always volunteered for the medevac runs. My chest tightened. He continued. When I saw your letter, I pushed it up the chain. It took longer than it should have. I'm sorry for that. I shook my head. You said his name. That's what matters. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth. Bent down slowly and polished the brass letters. You know he said we're getting this plaque redone next month. Name's gonna be right this time. For the first time since lunch started, I smiled. Not a big one, not a happy one, but a real one. Because sometimes remembering someone isn't about statues or speeches. Sometimes it's as simple as fixing a name on a wall. The school assembly started at 1:30. I knew because the bell rang 5 minutes early, something it never did. Students filed into the auditorium loud and buzzing like it was just another chance to skip class. A few boys joked about the guest speaker, betting it'd be some old guy with a slideshow. I didn't say a word, just found my seat in the last row, far right side where I always sat during assemblies. Where no one would notice me. Where I could hide behind the heads in front and keep my thoughts to myself. The jacket felt heavier now. Maybe it was the lights. Maybe it was the weight of expectation. Or maybe it was the fact that for the first time I had no idea what would happen next. Earlier in the hallway, Vice Principal Davis had said, "There's someone who asked to be here today. Someone who knew your dad." When I asked who, he just smiled and said, "You'll see." So now I sat, waiting. The curtain opened. A few teachers stood at the podium thanking the veterans in the crowd. 2 kids from the student council read a pre-written speech. It was respectful, but generic. I could feel students checking their phones. Boredom was winning. Until the door near the stage opened, and a man in full dress uniform stepped out. His medals gleamed under the lights. 4 stars on his shoulder. Sharp. Composed. Quiet power. He didn't need to raise his voice. The room fell silent before he spoke. My name is General Wallace. I served with Captain John Grayson. He saved my life. Just like that. You could hear the air shift. Even the students who rolled their eyes minutes before leaned forward. The teachers stood a little straighter. The entire auditorium became still. I was a young lieutenant on my first deployment when I met John. He was older, wiser, always calm in the worst moments. He told a story I'd never heard, about a nighttime evacuation under fire. How Dad had pulled wounded men into a helicopter twice, refusing to board it himself until every last man was safe. He didn't brag. He didn't dramatize. He just spoke like a man who had waited years to say what needed to be said. Then he paused. I came here today not to talk about war, but about memory. Captain Grayson's name was almost forgotten in this very building. But one person refused to let that happen. His eyes scanned the crowd. Emily Grayson, will you please stand? Every heartbeat felt like a drum inside my chest. I stood slowly. My legs shook, but I didn't fall. The lights hit me. Hundreds of eyes turned. Some widened in surprise. Some softened. I held my dad's jacket closed with both hands. My name tag on my chest. His name tag in my pocket. The general nodded at me. Not like a command, but like a salute. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "heroes don't disappear. Not when they leave behind daughters like her." The room erupted in applause. It wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive. It was respectful, and it lasted long enough to make my eyes sting. As I sat back down, someone behind me whispered, "I didn't know." And I thought, that's the point. You don't have to know, you just have to care enough to listen. After the assembly ended, the crowd didn't rush out like usual. There was a hush, a kind of respectful confusion in the air, as if everyone had witnessed something bigger than they'd expected and didn't quite know how to process it. Some kids glanced at me as they passed, not with mockery this time, but like I was suddenly someone they hadn't really seen before. I stayed seated, still in the back row, still holding the edges of my father's jacket, still afraid that if I moved too quickly it would all disappear. Vice Principal Davis approached quietly. "There's someone waiting in the front office," he said. "Wants to speak with you in private." My stomach tightened. Was I in trouble? Had someone complained about me wearing the uniform jacket? He offered a gentle smile. "You're not in trouble. You're being honored." I stood up, knees unsteady. The jacket weighed a little less now, like it had released something I didn't know I'd been holding. The walk to the office felt longer than usual. The hallway was mostly empty, just a few stragglers grabbing late lunch or lingering near lockers. I kept my eyes down, but I could feel the shift in energy. No one laughed. No one whispered. It was like the story General Wallace told had changed more than just the air, it had changed how people saw me. At the office door, I paused, then opened it. Inside stood a woman in army uniform. Late 30s. Bronze skin. Short-cut hair tucked under her cap. She smiled softly and removed her hat. "Emily Grayson?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Monroe. Your father and I served together." She sat across from me in the small conference room. The secretary had brought in 2 bottles of water and quietly left. Colonel Monroe placed a small velvet box on the table. She didn't open it. "I was with your dad in Syria. The day he..." She paused, gathered herself. "The day he was killed." My throat closed. I hadn't spoken to anyone who was there. Not even Mom had told me much. Colonel Monroe looked me in the eye. "He saved a boy, 12 years old, Syrian civilian, caught in crossfire. Your dad carried him nearly a mile under fire to get him out. The medics told him to stay down, but he wouldn't." I felt something tighten in my chest, both pain and pride. She slid the box toward me. "This is the Silver Star. It's awarded for gallantry in action. Your father was nominated posthumously. It was approved last month." I stared at the box. Silver Star. The same one they give to heroes. "He never got to wear it," she continued, "but I thought, maybe you could." I opened it slowly. The metal glinted under the overhead light, polished, beautiful, undeservedly silent. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My voice had folded into itself. She reached into her pocket and handed me a letter. Handwritten. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I'm sorry I broke my promise. I wanted to come home. I swear I did. But if I had to go, I wanted it to be doing something that mattered. I love you, and I'm proud of you always. Love, Dad." I held the paper with trembling hands, and for the first time in a long, long time, I let myself cry. Colonel Monroe waited. She didn't speak, didn't interrupt, just gave me space to be a daughter again. Not a student, not a memorial, just a girl missing her dad. As she stood to leave, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "Today, Emily, you made sure people remembered him. That matters more than you know." I nodded, then whispered, "Thank you." When I walked out of that office, medal in one hand, letter in the other, I didn't feel invisible anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. The medal rested in its velvet box on my desk. The letter, creased, tear-stained, tucked under my pillow. I'd read it at least a dozen times. And still the ink felt fresh. Still the words landed like a whisper and a weight all at once. Mom knocked on my bedroom door around midnight. She walked in quietly, carrying something folded in both hands. It was Dad's old army dress uniform, the one he wore for ceremonies and special briefings. the one I'd only seen in photographs. She laid it gently across my bed. "I thought it was time you had this," she said softly. "He would have wanted you to wear it someday." I touched the fabric. Stiff. Decorated. It still smelled faintly like his aftershave and sand. Mom sat on the edge of the bed. She looked tired but peaceful. "I heard about the assembly," she said. I nodded. She paused. "Your dad would have been so proud." "But more than that?" "He would have laughed." "Laughed?" I asked. She smiled, eyes twinkling. "He always said, if I can embarrass Emily into doing something brave, then I've done my job as a father." I laughed through tears. It felt good to laugh again. The next morning, something had shifted. The air in the house was lighter, like something had been set free. At school, people held the door open. They nodded at me in the hallway. Some even smiled, awkward, unsure, but honest. I wasn't invisible anymore. But it wasn't just about me. It was about him. About what he did. About what it meant. About remembering. Later that week, Vice Principal Davis called me to his office again. On the table was a framed certificate, a printed school newsletter, and a draft of a new plaque. He pushed them toward me one by one. "We'd like to rename the school's memorial hallway," he said. I blinked. "Rename it?" He nodded. "To the Captain John Grayson Memorial Hallway. If you approve." I couldn't speak for a second. My fingers touched the plaque design. It was simple, elegant. And this time, his name was spelled perfectly. The school also printed a short article in the newsletter titled, "One Student's Letter Revives a Hero's Legacy." They quoted parts of the general's speech. They included a photo of Dad from his service file. And they closed with a line that made my chest ache in the best way. "We remember Captain John Grayson not just for how he served, but for the daughter he raised." But the most surprising part, it wasn't the hallway, or the applause, or the ceremony. It was the letters. Over the next few weeks, our mailbox filled up actual handwritten letters from veterans, teachers, Gold Star families. Some came from states away. Most began the same way. "I didn't know your father, but now I'll never forget his name." One letter stood out. From a young man in Syria. He said he was the boy Dad had carried that day. Now 13, living in the U.S. His family had immigrated 2 years ago. He wrote, "I'm alive because of your father. I never knew his name. Now I say it every day." I brought that letter to school. Read it aloud during the Veterans Day follow-up assembly. And this time I didn't sit in the back row. The memorial hallway was quiet after school hours. Sunlight spilled through the windows, landing on the fresh brass plaque. It read, "In honor of Captain John Grayson, a father, a soldier, a hero." And just beneath, "His legacy lives in those brave enough to remember." I traced the edge of the frame with my fingers. No dust yet. No fingerprints. Only warmth. Mom stood behind me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. She hadn't said a word the whole walk down the hall. Then finally she spoke. "He would have never asked for any of this." I nodded. "I know." She smiled faintly. "But he would have cried." Quietly, when no one was looking. That made us both laugh. We walked outside together. Students were trickling out of the building, heading home. Some waved. Some just smiled in passing. One younger girl I didn't know at all ran up to me and said, "Are you the girl from the story?" I hesitated, then nodded. She looked at my jacket, Dad's jacket, and asked wide-eyed, "Was he really that brave?" I knelt to her level. "Yes, but he was also funny and kind, and he used to make grilled cheese with way too much cheese." She giggled. "That's a hero too," she said. That night I sat by my bedroom window, the silver star open on my desk, catching moonlight. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I opened a fresh notebook and began to write. Not a eulogy. Not a tribute. But a letter. To someone like me. To a kid who might be sitting alone on the back row. Wearing something that doesn't fit right. Carrying more weight than anyone sees. Dear stranger, you might feel small right now. You might feel invisible or even foolish for caring so much. But the truth is, it takes courage to remember someone the world forgot. It takes strength to wear their name out loud. And one day you'll find that your quiet love changed more than you know. So sit up, Breathe deep. Keep walking. You are not alone. Sincerely, Emily Grayson. That letter never got mailed, but it stayed taped inside my locker for the rest of the year. And every time someone looked at me differently, not out of pity but respect, I knew it was working. Memory isn't about statues or medals. It's about the space we make for each other, to feel, to grieve, to honor, and to carry on. If you've ever lost someone, a parent, a sibling, a comrade, please know this. Their story didn't end with the silence. It lives in you. In the way you stand, in the words you speak, in the honor you refuse to bury. So don't be afraid to sit in the back row, because sometimes, from the quietest seat in the room comes the loudest legacy. If this story moved you, take a moment to remember someone by name. Say it out loud. Write it in a journal. Tell it to a friend. Because remembrance isn't just for the fallen, it's for the living who carry them. And if you believe stories like Emily's deserve to be heard, share this video. Let someone else know they're not alone. From one heart to another, thank you for listening.